To the Joe Luca Real Estate Show. I am Joe, and I'm your host every Tuesday evening right here on WNRI 99.9 FM 1380 on the AM dial, and of course, streaming 24/7 on the World Wide Web at WNRI.com. I've been here. We've been here more than a decade talking about real estate for you, the consumer. I try to provide a little bit of clarity about the real estate market, how not to be overwhelmed or misled by headlines. We've talked about several times in the past how they can make things seem like it's good or bad, and it is indeed neither or the opposite of what they're trying to convey. What I want to talk about this week is we're going to go into quite a bit of detail on it. Everyone talks about housing affordability. And last week we talked about rent control and how that is not a solution to housing affordability. And in fact, it can actually exacerbate the problem down the line. And it does nothing to address challenges right now. So if someone is paying rent right now and they think they're paying too much high, and then tomorrow morning they pass rent control, it's not going to make your rent any easier to pay because your rent will stay the same. What it will do is it will go into effect at some point in the future, and there are certain things that are covered, certain things that aren't covered. There are always some exemptions, and it's never the panacea, the cure-all that a lot of people expect it to be. But of course, when everyone's talking about housing affordability, rent control is something that gets the attention of a lot of people. What I want to talk about tonight is on the buying side. So there are different ways that people can buy properties, different tools that can be used, different types of structure that can be used so that folks can buy a home more affordably than otherwise. And one of the things that's actually in other parts of the country that's becoming a little bit more common and a solution is something called co-buying a home. And this is typically as young adults. So folks, wherever you're tuning in from, I'm glad you're here because, of course, if you're listening on WNRI.com, you could be anywhere in the country, anywhere in the globe. So pay attention. Today, we're diving into a topic that's hitting home, literally, for millions of young adults across the country. Let's be honest. Trying to buy a home right now can feel like trying to climb a mountain in flip-flops. It's very frustrating, very challenging. Prices are up. Interest rates are unpredictable. Okay, they've come down from where they were. Rent keeps rising. And student loans, well, they're still very much a thing. My older daughter has student loans, and those are going to be it's a big monthly payment. But here's the twist now. Young adults aren't giving up in some places. They're getting creative. What do I mean by that? It's not creative financing like you used to see on those late infomercials back in the 80s and 90s. What they're doing is they're rewriting the rules of home ownership. And one of the biggest trends emerging right now is something called co-buying. Teaming up with a friend, a sibling, a partner, or even a parent to buy a home together. Now, this isn't the old school model where you wait until you're married, buy a house with a white picket fence, and settle down. This is a new generation saying, look, if the system isn't built for us, we're going to build our own path to home ownership. Back in the day, of course, kids would stay living with their parents and then for at least a longer period of time. And then when they became involved with a significant other, then they would, buy a home. They'd saved all the money from living at home, and then they could move off on their own. Co-buyers are getting into homes faster, building equity sooner, and accessing neighborhoods that they never could have afforded alone. What do you mean by that, Joe? Well, what I mean by that is these young home buyers, because they're co-buying, with a co-borrower, they're able to afford a better home in a better neighborhood and on a better street. Co-buying isn't about just money, it's about lifestyle. You know, excuse me, when you have two people splitting a down payment, two incomes on a mortgage application, sharing monthly costs, shared responsibilities, and then instead of paying a landlord's high mortgage via rent, you're building your own wealth together. So this co-buying, it's about a lifestyle, about community, better quality of living, better quality neighborhood, better quality home. It's about saying, hey, why not create a home with someone I trust? We're seeing friends buying duplexes, siblings investing together, and parents helping their kids get a foothold in a tough market. It's a shift, a big one, and it's changing the way we think about home ownership. Excuse me, I want to harken back to a time when, or even today in many countries in Europe, kids live with their parents until they're 40, maybe even after they're married. Okay, so this is something that's even new compared to that. It's not all sunshine and open houses, this whole process. Co-buying comes with real straight-up responsibilities, real conversations, and real planning. You need agreements, boundaries, and shared vision. But when it's done right, it can be one of the smartest financial moves a young adult can make today, because you get into participating in the American dream sooner and not later. So what I want to do is, over the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to break this down. We're going to talk about why co-buying is growing, how it works, the benefits, the risks, the legal stuff, the lifestyle perks, the whole shebang, as we say. And if you have any concerns or questions, you can give me a call tomorrow, 401-409-5030, or you can call me tonight at 769-0600 if you want to talk on the air. But I'd be more than happy to talk to you if you're thinking about this and you want to investigate to see if it's something you could do to buy a home. We can certainly talk about that, but just call me tomorrow and not tonight. So a question you would want to ask yourself is, would you buy a home with a friend? Would you team up with your brother or your sister? What scares you about it? What do you find exciting? What do you find intriguing? Now stick with me, because whether you're dreaming about your first home, trying to escape the rent cycle, trying to get out of mom and dad's house, or just curious about how young adults are navigating this wild housing market, tonight's subject might just open a door you didn't know existed. So let's jump right into it. We're going to start talking about it, and I think you're going to be intrigued with how realistic and how viable this is. All right, hold on right here. So, one of the things, of course, the main impetus for something like this is money. But it's not just about money, as I said earlier. It's also about other considerations which can make this enjoyable or make it hell on earth. Excuse my English. If you're a young adult, you're trying to buy a home today, you probably think it's impossible, especially if you think you need 20% down to buy a house, which you don't. Home prices are rising. The median price of a single-family home in Rhode Island is over $500,000. Rents are high. Student debt is high. But now we have a potential way out, a potential solution, and it's co-buying. Friends buying together, siblings teaming up, parents co-signing. This can be a legitimate option. It's important that you understand the good with the bad. What expectations do you have outside of the numbers? Okay. One of the things we're seeing in society in general is a cultural shift toward collaboration and shared resources. Millennials and Gen Z have been embracing non-traditional paths. And in plain English, this is not your parents', your grandparents' housing market. In response, young adults have been rewriting the rules of home ownership. A lot of people still think of home ownership as the American dream, but there's a growing number of people that question that. They question if they'll ever be able to afford a home and be part of the American dream. Well, as we mentioned earlier, some of the benefits of co-buying are you have a shared down payment. So if you're buying a house with an FHA mortgage, okay, instead of 3.5% yourself, it's 1.75%. Excuse me. You have higher combined income. Now, of course, even when you're co-buying, you still need to be gainfully employed for at least 2 years. Your monthly expenses, your costs, the mortgage, utilities, taxes are split 2 ways. If one of you loses a job, the other one might be able to pick up the slack, whereas if you own the house yourself and you lose the job, you are up the creek. This is something that's important too, and I mentioned this before, buying in a better neighborhood or closer to work. But buying in a better neighborhood is important because I always tell people, my clients, try to buy the best house on the best street in the best neighborhood that you can afford, as opposed to buying the biggest or prettiest house in something other than the best neighborhood and the best town. If you have 2 friends who work hard and they each save $15,000, maybe now they can buy a $400,000 home. Maybe if it's a parent, they can help with the down payment. So, these are the things that can really make it more feasible and more realistic and more attractive to a lot of home buyers. Now, you get built-in community and support. Okay, you always have someone to hang out with, to talk to share the responsibilities around the house, yard work, overall maintenance, just chores, space for hobbies, okay, pets, remote work. These are all things that can figure into living with a co-borrower. And its stability compared to renting with roommates, because even if you have great roommates, my daughter's fortunate, she has 3 roommates that are awesome. They've been together, this is their 4th year. But if you can have the best roommates, but if your landlord decides to sell the house, you're going to have to move at some point in all likelihood. Okay, so that's something that can really disrupt that stability trajectory. Now, when you have roommates, you're kind of dealing with a different, I don't want to have this taken the wrong way, but a different caliber of someone that you're living with, to cohabitate with. If you are buying a house with someone, or a condo, or a multifamily, generally it's going to be someone who's a little more stable, a little less transient. Okay, and because they're putting up some of the money for the down payment, they have equity. There are many, many stories of friends who bought a house together and then turned it into a long-term investment after they moved on with their significant other. But as I said before, not everything is, happy-go-lucky. Sometimes there are financial disagreements. There may be uneven contributions. One person may decide they want to sell before the other one does. All of a sudden, one's credit goes down and the other one stays high. Relationship changes. Okay, your co-borrower your co-buyer may have a significant other that you don't like. These are things that can really be challenging and frustrating. But there are ways to deal with these with a little bit of planning. You can have a co-ownership agreement that will spell out everything. You can have clear exit strategies that if this is what we're going to do, the two partners, the two owners are going to sell this property in 5 years. If at that time one wants to buy the other one out, you can do it, but at the very least, it's not going to be two people owning the house in 5.5 years. Setting expectations for repairs, upgrades, shared spaces. If you have two folks and one's real handy and the other one doesn't know which end of a hammer to hold, that could be a recipe for a disaster if everything is going to fall on the one who's handy. Maybe he or she doesn't want to take the responsibility of all the repairs. So that's something that should be dealt with ahead of time. Repairs, upgrades, okay? Shared spaces, okay? We have this common area room, the living room, the family room, whatever. What's it going to be used for? Is it going to be your office, my hobby area, an office for both of us, or just a media room? These are the things that need to be addressed ahead of time. They need to be memorialized, put in writing. Legal structures, tenants in common or joint tenancy. And this is the point at which I want to advise, if you're going to do something like this, in addition to working with an experienced, professional, full-time realtor who can provide guidance so that you maximize your outcome, you need to work with an attorney who's experienced in real estate law. I have attorneys that I work with who are great at this. Of course, I'm conveying this information to you, my listening audience, and potential clients down the road. And I'd be more than happy to talk to you about ways that you could put together a plan so that you could find a co-borrower, co-buyer, so that in a month, 2 months, 6 months, you can become a homeowner. Now, some questions which you may want to ask yourself are, what would be the biggest fear about co-buying? How would you handle a disagreement about selling? So now we already talked about having agreements in place at the beginning. You don't want to have these agreements lingering out there, not being executed until after you close. It has to be done ahead of time so no one is on the hook or obligated to something that they don't want. Because, okay, we agree that we're going to sell the house at this point in time. What other factors should you consider, could be considered? Return on equity. One co-borrower put a lot of money in and made all the repairs, and that has monetary value. No, it doesn't. These are things that can all be addressed ahead of time with the appropriate documentation. Something else, that the term that's out there now is something called house hacking. I've actually had clients do this, where they buy a house and then they rent out rooms to offset the cost. So they may rent out a bedroom, and obviously there are very strict guidelines for what can and can't be done. You can't rent out a bedroom and have overnight guests for more than a couple nights. If you're renting out rooms, is there adequate parking for everyone, or are you only going to rent to people that don't have a car? When you do that, that creates another set of challenges as well. Friends buying duplexes or multi-unit homes, that is a really good way to do it, because you each have your own demised space and your own privacy. That eliminates a lot of the challenges. So if you're buying a duplex or two-family, Or if it's a three-family, each of you occupy two units, and then the third unit is rented out. Siblings buying starter homes together if they both want to live in the same area. Or investment groups forming small partnerships. Let's say you already own your home. Let's say you've owned your home a long time, but you'd like to get into the real estate business, air quotes. You want to become a real estate investor. There are ways to do this as well. It's important that you understand the obligations and responsibilities and the challenges of landlording. Landlording is not easy. You know, everyone thinks about the people they see that they're landlords and they're making all this money and living large and own a lot of houses. There's a lot of work that goes into going from where you buy the house to where you buy your second house and you're profitable and making money. Getting phone calls about noisy neighbors, leaky faucets, leaky toilets, electrical problems, domestic assaults. I had problems like that when I had my properties where, you know, the boyfriend used to come over at night and would try and break down the brand new solid wood door that I put in. These were things that you have to deal with. Okay? The cops come. Now, a situation like that, the cops come, there's something happening on the inside of the house, like maybe there's a drug dealer. Guess what? They're not going to wait for that door to be open. They're going to break it down. They're going to break it down. Now you have a tenant that's living in an unsecured apartment. You get that set of problems. Toilets overflow. Oh, the water goes down into the apartment below. Now you've got two tenants who are upset. These are all of the challenges that come with landlording, being an investor owner. And these are things that you need to be prepared for. Now, you're considering becoming a co-buyer. The first thing you need to do is you need to put together a list of people who you would consider buying a piece of real estate with. And try to put together a list of more than one person and then write down the pros and cons for each one. After you narrow it down, discuss finances openly. Don't run away from the challenging subjects, the scary ones. What happens if you lose your job? What happens if I lose my job? Meet with a lender together. Total transparency is very important, and having common goals, objectives, and exit strategy. These are all things that can be dealt with up front, and they should be in writing. And it's all included in a document that's called a co-ownership agreement. Planning for the future. If you're going to refinance, if one partner wants to buy the other partner, what are the terms that are going to be expected? You both decide you want to sell, or one wants to sell now and the other one wants to sell in 6 months. Again, these are things that need to be addressed before you even start looking at houses. You need to have all of this paperwork taken care of. Excuse me. Now, the best way to start this is a conversation, maybe a casual conversation. So you narrowed it down to a couple of different people. Go out for a cup of coffee. You know, I've been thinking about, jeepers, I'm paying all this money in rent. I know you're paying a lot of rent. I wonder if there would be a chance where we could buy a house together. What do you think? Oh, no, I don't want to do that. I want to wait. I want to buy it with my girlfriend, my boyfriend, my parent. Okay, rule them off. Have a conversation with the next person. Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing. Or, that's interesting. I never thought about that. How would that work? Start with a conversation. Feel each other out. It's not a commitment. After you agree, treat it like a business partnership with friendship on top as a benefit. If you respect the business partnership, the friendship will last. Co-borrowing, co-buying is a powerful tool, and it's a tool that can be an assertive tool, not a last resort. It's like, oh, I can't do this. Let me just resort to that. The purpose of my talking about this with you tonight is just to kind of present another option. If you're thinking about buying a home, you're a little overwhelmed or a little stressed, you're down on, the economy, you're down on yourself. Let me point out, people make money no matter what the economy is doing. If the economy is expanding, the economy is contracting, people are always making, there's always an opportunity there. Part of my job is to work with my clients to help them receive the best possible outcome from their real estate transaction. This is a way that you can do that if you are a renter right now. So if you're listening, I would encourage you to rethink what home ownership can look like. Now, if you are a property owner and you don't want to sell your property at a discount, but you'd like to sell it, maybe you can find co-buyers that will help you sell your property so they can buy it. Create an opportunity for them by addressing a want or a need that you have. There are lots of myths out there about real estate. We've talked about this in the past. Everything from the 20% down for a down payment to, adjustable rate mortgages, fixed rate mortgages, jumbo rates. We've talked about all the different things. And, one of the myths that a lot of people still have is you have to be married to buy a home together. Not true. Co-buying ruins friendships. It can. I can give you a story about that. When I was young, I co-purchased a property with someone, and I did it for all the wrong reasons and didn't have anything written up ahead of time. Should have listened to my grandmother. And in that situation, I had all the exposure because I had the credit and the equity, and my friend had neither, but he was going to be living there, and it was out of state. Yes, I know. Not a good move. Well, when you're 22 years old, you make stupid mistakes. So in that case, it did ruin the friendship. It was disappointing, but now I know, and I can share that lesson with you so you won't make the same mistake. Another myth is that banks won't approve co-borrowers. This is something also that's not true, and I have lenders that I work with who are adept at this and are eager to write these types of loans. All right, some success stories. 2 teachers. You've got 2 young teachers. They're single. They teach in the same district or in the same school. They can buy a house together, have similar hours, similar demands on their schedule. Makes perfect sense. 3 friends buying a triple decker. All right. Or you've got, a parent and a young adult teaming up to buy equally and maybe start building an investment portfolio together. Those are some examples of potential success stories. Red flags to watch for. Someone with unstable income. Okay. you need to have someone, in order for them to get a loan, they need to have been working in the same profession for 2 years. Someone who doesn't communicate with you, or they just don't have a long-term vision. It's very important that your co-buyer has stable income. Okay, they're not flighty, they're not transient. They're committed to staying in this city, town, state. They're not talking about, oh, I wish I could move to Florida where there's no snow. That's not a good sign. Or if they don't communicate with you, they don't tell you that they lost their job. Or you want someone with you who is going to share the long-term vision, and they're committed to living in Rhode Island, or better yet, northern Rhode Island, southern Rhode Island, specific town. So that way because if you can focus on one geographic area, and then in 5 years you want to buy a second property, stay in that same area because it makes it easier to manage the properties. If you have someone and they're like, yeah, I want to buy another property, but I want my second property to be in New York City or Boston, that may not be a good sign. So these are some of the things that, that really can be great, but they can also be challenging. But the big takeaway here is that even the challenging things can be addressed. Because if you work with an attorney, you work with a real estate professional, you can have these taken care of ahead of time. So everyone, as we say, is reading from the same sheet of music. That's essential. Okay? Now, since we're talking about affordability, what are mortgage interest rates doing today? Well, before we get into that, I want to do a shout out to Compass Title and Escrow. They are the title and closing attorney for residential and commercial properties that we send our clients to. Anthony Betancourt and his team do a great job taking care of our buyers and sellers. And of course, Vern Rainville. Vern, a public insurance adjuster. That means he works for you. He's licensed by the state of Rhode Island to represent you, not the insurance company. But you have to give him a call if you think you have a claim. 484-300-8495. Again, 484-300-8495. That's Vern Rainville, public insurance adjuster. He will return your call within 24 hours. And yes, I know you're going to say, but Joe, that's not a 401 area code. Where is he from? He's a Rhode Island guy. 484-300-8495. Vern Rainville, public insurance adjuster. You will be satisfied. Okay, so mortgage interest rates, going to my trusty mortgagenewsdaily.com. As of right now, the 30-year fixed rate mortgage is 6.21%, 0.14 higher than yesterday. The 30-year FHA 5.88, 30-year VA 5.90. Now the VA, what's the big difference between the VA and the FHA? VA, no money down. VA, no PMI. VA can be a little bit more forgiving on your credit history. So the 30-year FHA 5.88, 30-year VA 5.9. So folks, we are back into the fives for mortgage interest rates. Inflation has been declining. The economy, the GDP, has been improving. These all bode well for mortgage rates and housing. We shall see. Now, there are a number of things that could be a fly in the ointment, at least in the short term. The stock market today was down significantly, over 2%. That's probably related more to all of the global issues. You know, the president talking about taking over Greenland. I think Greenland is going to become part of the United States one way or another. Maybe not. Maybe we're not going to buy it. I don't think we're going to buy it. We're not going to invade it. But we already have agreements with Greenland from during World War II. We can put bases anywhere we want, pretty much in Greenland. We have a base there, Puftik, that we are expanding the runway length to 2 miles. That's happening now. So it's just a matter of how it's going to be adjusted so the deal is better for us. How are we going to leverage circumstances so that it comes to help us in the United States? We have to worry about us because no one else does. We're seeing all this fraud across the country. That's people who are taking care of themselves, and sometimes these monies were getting sent to another country to people who were had animosity towards us. We need to take care of ourselves because if we don't in this country, who's going to? Okay, and in Rhode Island, we need to take care of Rhode Islanders because Massachusetts people certainly aren't. Connecticut people certainly aren't. So we have to do what's best for us financially and otherwise. I wish our politicians would understand that. You know, one of the things that I don't want to get off on politics, but people always would complain when I was growing up, all these politicians, they are never planned for the future. It's always just what's immediate. I think right now we've got a guy in the White House who's planning for the future down the road. He's not playing checkers, he's playing chess. We always talk about how the Japanese and the Chinese and, you know, all these Asian countries, their civilizations are so much older than ours, and they were looking 100 years from now. They're not planning for 6 months from now. Well, I think that's what's happening. We have leaders in this country now that are planning for 10 years from now, not 10 months from now, or 10 minutes from now. As the country is stronger, our states can be stronger, our incomes can become stronger and more stable. As more people have stable income, which is really good if you're trying to buy a house, that's going to increase the net worth, the wealth of more Americans. You know, if you looked at what we had at the worst in our economy, what's that, 15 years ago? And compared to someone who is poor in this country to people who are poor in other parts of the world, we have it head and shoulders over them. Thank God we live in a country that does not experience true poverty. Yes, we have poor people, I know that. But we've been very blessed in this country. We need to do more with our blessings. We've, you know, on other shows in this station, they've talked about homelessness and people living outside. I think that's terrible. I think we need to address that. You know, I've had a couple of callers reach out to me and share their frustrations with that. I don't think the government should take care of it, the city or the state. I think private sector should step in as well. We need to figure something out. I don't have answers, but I think if we get some, you know, people together to talk about it, maybe we could generate some answers and then figure a way to get there. Okay. Folks, you are listening to the Joe Luca Real Estate Show right here on WNRI 99.9 FM 1380 on the AM dial. And, of course, streaming 24/7 at WNRI.com. WNRI.com. This show, by the way, is rebroadcast every Saturday at 1 p.m. So if you can't catch it on Tuesdays, tune in Saturdays at 1 and you'll be able to catch the show. Incidentally, before I forget, it's about 15 before the hour. After this show, Rick Murney is going to be on with some exceptional scripture interpretation. Rick does a really good job explaining many passages from the good books of the Bible. And I encourage everyone to tune in after the Joe Luca Real Estate Show to Rick Mernier because it's a great, great show. So getting back to housing, okay, we were talking about co-buying, co-borrowing, talking about interest rates, which have been coming down. Wages, real wages have been increasing. Inflation has been going down. The price of gas is down. It's just a matter of other things. If we continue to push the price of fuel down, that drives everything. If it takes less fuel to bring the food to the market, the price of the food in the market is going to go down. So we need to keep working on that energy dominance in this country, continuing to grow the economy so more people are working, making more money. One of the things, I'm kind of a nerd, so I kind of dive into some of the numbers as far as the economy and talking about employment and unemployment. And one of the differences that we're seeing now with the folks who are getting jobs is that there are people who are transitioning, whereas before they were working 2 or maybe 3 jobs to make enough money to support themselves. Now they can cut back and go from 3 to 2 or from 2 to 1 job and be able to support themselves. And this may not look, and if you're looking at the numbers, it sees the number of jobs filled, number of job openings. That may not look like a good statistic, but when you dig down a little deeper and you see, okay, now there are 2 job openings because that person who had 3 jobs before, they got rid of 1, and we got rid of 2 and stayed with 1 that was paying enough money to replace the other 2. That's something very good, even if they're making the same money. If you have someone that can work 1 job and make the same amount of money as they were earning when they worked at 3 jobs, which would you rather have? These are things that are kind of like, subliminal aspects of our economy that are improving, that no one sees, no one knows to ask the question, and the media sure as heck is not going to report it. The mainstream media is not going to report that. Okay. And I mentioned, the stock market, they were down today. I'm one of those people that, yes, it's nice when the stock market does well, but the stock market can be doing well and it cannot be for the good of this country. And that's because Wall Street worries about Wall Street. Wall Street worries about its pockets. It does not worry about the financial security of this country, the rights of, the privacy rights of people in this country. Wall Street invests in companies that can make money for investors. So I just want to point out that sometimes when the stock market is doing well, we need to tap the brakes, take a look at it and say, is this necessarily really good for America, good for our citizens? Because there were times a few years ago where you had companies that were attempting to get a foothold in China, and they were agreeing to things that they shouldn't have been agreeing to because it was not for the benefit of America. It was for the benefit of their shareholders. And many times their shareholders are the people at the top of the pie, the cream of the crop, or the people who run these hedge funds or who run these retirement systems. We need to pay attention to what's good for the average American, like you, like me. Someone who doesn't have a trust fund, doesn't have money that's automatically deposited to their account every week or every month. Someone who goes out and grinds every day and works to do what they can to keep a roof over their head and that of their family. And there are people who do that and they make a ton of money, and there are people who do that and make scratch. But one thing they all have in common is they're all working hard. Nothing comes easy. Nothing comes for free. So hopefully, by listening to the Joe Luca Real Estate Show every Tuesday night, you are learning, you're gathering data points, information that will help you become more educated about real estate, so that when you buy or sell real estate, you will receive the best possible income. That's what I try to do for all of my clients. I want them to have the best possible outcome from their transaction. I think I just said income. I meant outcome. The best possible outcome from selling your home, from buying a home, from buying and selling. And I try to provide information so that if you are a tenant, you're a renter, whether you're 25 or 55 and you're thinking about buying your first home, you can do it. You need to plan ahead. You need to put together a plan, and then you work your plan. The best way to have a plan like that is to work with a trusted real estate advisor, like yours truly, Joe Luca. 401-409-5030. That's my business cell phone number. You can give me a call at 401-409-5030. You can also text me at that number. I'll answer all questions. I can't pick up the phone all the time, so that's why I say text me first and I'll get back to you, because a lot of my business is spent meeting with people and talking on the phone. So if I'm doing that, I can't pick up the phone. But that's just part of the gig, as they say. But my objective has always been to provide you, the consumer, with more information so that every week you learn a little bit more about the real estate business, the business of buying and selling residential property, so that you are more informed so you can make better decisions for your family and yourself. Okay. So, folks, we are coming up towards the end of the show. Again, we've been talking about, last week we talked about rent control. Tonight we talked about co-buying. Two subjects that are important for people who question the affordability of rent, the affordability of buying a home. There are ways to challenge, to take up these challenges and win, but it may not be the conventional way that you would think. Okay? Rents have been going up. In other parts of the country, rents have come down this past year. Not so much here in the Northeast, especially in northern Rhode Island and Massachusetts. Rents have been pretty sticky. And, paying $1,200 a month for a one-bedroom, third-floor apartment in Woonsocket is market rent. Not a lot of money. So that's something that when I can remember when I had my first apartment in Boston. This will tell you how long ago this was. Holy smokes. I was paying $550 a month for a two-bedroom apartment in the North End. Now, back then, the North End was still the North End. It was all Italians, and the mafia was still very present. It wasn't as bougie as it is now. But that was, what I said $550. It was $750 a month. That was a lot of money. And I had a situation, another lesson I learned. I had a roommate, a friend of mine, who's supposed to be my roommate and pay half the rent. And then the month before we moved in, after I signed the lease, he backed out. Never saw him again. Don't know what ever happened to that kid. But that's another example of why you need to have these arrangements, these agreements in writing before you sign on the dotted line. Okay? Before you sign on the dotted line. Get everything communicated up front. If you have questions, ask. Deal with a real estate professional. Deal with an attorney who's experienced in real estate law. That way, you won't have unfortunate surprises. And whether you're renting, buying, or selling, when it comes to real estate, surprises are never, ever good. I defy anyone to call me and tell me a good surprise during a real estate transaction. 401-409-5030. Give me a call after the show or tomorrow. 401-409-5030. Joe, Luca. By the way, I work at a company called Remax Preferred, where our office is in North Providence. I drive to North Providence from Cumberland because I like the dynamic, the vibe in that office better than the offices that are closer. And it's a great group of people. Of course, it's also kind of nice, too, that office is 5 minutes away from the house I grew up in. But, yeah, so I work at Remax. I'm also, by the way, president of the Providence chapter of the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals, NAHREP, NAREP. This is a great group of dynamic Hispanic business professionals who are working to expand the Hispanic home ownership rate and increase Hispanic wealth. Again, something if you want to learn more about that, either as a business owner or as a consumer, because we have a lot of programs directed towards consumers to help them buy and sell real estate, just give me a call. It's Joe, Luca, Luca, 401-409-5030. That's 401-409-5030, Joe, Luca. And yeah, I'm very proud to be part of the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals. Great group of local people and a great group nationally. I've met some awesome leaders in the real estate industry, from the Northeast, from Florida, Texas, California, even Canada. A lot of great people. So if you have any questions or you'd like to get involved with the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals, please reach out 401-409-5030. Again, a quick shout out. Thank you to Compass Title and Escrow, Anthony Betancourt, and his team do a fantastic job taking care of buyers and sellers. And then, of course, Vern Rainville, licensed by the state of Rhode Island to be a public insurance adjuster. And he will help you receive everything you are entitled to from your insurance company if you have a claim. Again, please give him a call, 484-300-8495, and he will take care of you. I want to say goodbye to everyone who's watching on YouTube right now. And